Evening YouTube, evening class. Welcome to Mr. Natural's classroom here in the lovely state of California in the Haight-Ashbury district. Tonight, we're going to work on rhythm and ear dictation. We're going to use a technique known as code words. Now last week, to sum things up, we talked about pulse, beat, subdivisions, we talked about bar lines, we talked about a measure of music being metered, and we talked about meter. And we also discussed things like different ways of notating meter. For instance, a lot of people, when they notate meter, they'll notate it as 2/4, or 3/4, or 4/4. These are the most common ones that we know of. These meters can be added together in various ways to create other types of meters, which themselves will generate a rhythm. And we talked about, at the end of the class, one of the more complicated ones that had been written for a play called Joan of Arc by Bill Russo for the San Francisco Free Theater back in 1970, in which we did 3 plus 2 plus 3 plus 2 plus 2. And usually you put that over 4, and this is what is known as a compound meter. All meters, no matter how complicated they are, can be broken down into some part of a 2, a 3, or a 4 meter. And these 2, 3s, and 4s can be added together to generate more complicated meters, which in themselves, just the count and putting an active beat on the first beat and letting the other beats be passive will automatically generate a rhythm. So what this thing did here is this thing generated a simple rhythm that went like this: 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3. And against that we put a duplet against the 3, a triplet against the 2, a duplet against the 3, a triplet against the 2, a triplet against the 2, and we got ba 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 ba. So compound meters themselves can generate rhythms, and that is one way to get started. Just work out a count and make it 5 or 7, in which you're using 2 plus 3 or 3 plus 2, or you're doing 2 plus 2 plus 3 or something like that. And all the oddball rhythms that you see can be broken down into much simpler units, which can be controlled. Today, we're going to talk about subdividing the beat down even further. Now, if we have hollow notes in music, usually they're like this. They have a round like that. Those represent beats longer than 2 beats. And if they come with a stem on them like that, that also is larger than 2 beats. So anything that's hollow is going to be 2 or more beats. If we fill it in and make it solid, then we are subdividing this to a single beat or a single heartbeat, a single pulse. And this single pulse can be divided into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. And it turns out it's actually easier to hear and to dictate and to learn than the longer rhythms are. Now most people start with the long rhythms and just bore their students to death, and you don't really get much accomplished. So we're going to start with a single beat, and we're going to subdivide that beat down into smaller and smaller units. For today's lesson, the only thing you need is a pencil and paper. And if you have a pencil and paper handy, please get it right now and keep it next to you. And what we're going to do is, by the end of this class, we hope that you will be able to hear and actually write down rhythms. I will show you some simpler ways of writing them rather than drawing these dots, which take a long time. And it's actually not a good practice to learn to do this on paper. You'll find that if you try to make these dots on paper, that it is very difficult to read. Most composers who write with pencil and paper don't do this anymore because it's too hard to control and too hard to read. So we'll show you a simpler way of doing it. Now, all of these subdivided rhythms are going to have one thing in common besides being solid. They will all have a stem on them. And occasionally we will put on them also a flag. And a flag usually is kind of like that. A flag. And anytime we draw something that keeps subdividing the beat down, keeps subdividing the beat, keeps subdividing the beat. So when we had here a hollow note with a line on it, it was 2 beats. When we filled it in, it became 1 beat. If we put a single flag on it like that, it becomes half of a beat. And if we put 2 flags on it like that, it now divides it into 1/4 of a beat. And on and on and on. And as we add flags, we are subdividing this, and all of these relationships are a relationship of 2 to 1. Now, one of the things that makes it easy to hear these things is to change this symbol that we're going to learn to look at into a word. And with words, if you get words that have evenly divided syllables, you can use those syllables as a way to measure how many subdivisions are going on within the beat, and you can control what's happening with the beat. So I'm going to introduce you to these things that we call code words. Now, in order to get this dictation going and teach you as much as you can to learn to read as quickly as possible, we're going to deal with only 4-beat meter. Our meter is always going to be 4 beats. So normally in music, this would be notated as 4/4, which is a whole number, saying that we're 1/4 of a note is happening 4 times in a measure. Each of these counts would be considered 1/4 of a whole measure. So the symbol that we use to write this out with is also known as a quarter note. And this, you have the numerator and the denominator, and this tells us what symbol we're using, in this case the quarter note symbol, and this tells us how many of those quarter notes will exist in one measure of time, and that becomes our meter. Another way of writing 4/4, because it is the most common, and you'll hear it in rock and roll all the time, most popular music is in 4. Most things are in 4 these days, most songs. So they have another thing that they use a big letter C, like this, called common time. So if you see 4/4 or common time, that means that each measure of the music is being divided into 4 beats, 4 individual pulses. Now what we're going to do is learn code words and learn the symbol for 1 whole beat, and then we're going to learn how to subdivide that beat. And today we're only going to divide it in half. And we're going to show you a code word which does that. It's a dual syllabic word that generates that rhythm automatically. Now the first symbol we're going to look at is the quarter note symbol. And with the quarter note symbol, it is simply that. As simple as that looks, that's a quarter note. Now, there's lots of different kinds of heads that people put on this staff, this little staff. Sometimes people will put an X. And when you see that, usually that's drum notation. This X means that the pitch is undifferentiated, and it could be anything that you bang on. So if I hit this, or hit that, hit the drum, hit myself in the head, whatever, that's this with an X. Another way that it's drawn is often it's just done with a slash. Just putting a slash, that is also called a quarter note, and it has 1 beat. Another way of drawing this is to draw this, and you will see people do a little thing like a diamond shape. The diamond shape comes from really old music around the 11th, 12th, 13th century, and that's because they had pens like these that had this flat part, and if you were to hold the pen like this and just go like that, instead of making a round circle, it made this little triangle shape like that. And then they would just put a stem, usually coming from the top. There were usually right from here, where it peaks. And you'll see old music is kind of written like this. This also is a quarter note and is represented by a single beat. Now the thing that's most common is we see people draw a circle. It is not a perfect circle. It is an ellipse, kind of like this. If I took this and went like that and like that, I would have the quarter note as we see it in printed music. All of these are considered a quarter note. Now I want you to notice the most important thing is the stem, not the note head, the stem. And the stem is telling us what the division is, and the stems are all identical. You can put any kind of note head you want on here. As a matter of fact, kids sometimes draw little flowers or put little animals on here. I'm fine with that. Whatever you want to do, you want to put a little star. Some kids draw these things and then put little stars on them, which is just fine. Anything that represents the pitch would be just fine. Any kind of note head is feasible. We're going to use the slash and we're going to use the X. The reason is it's faster to draw. Now, this symbol has a word that's associated with it. And when my partner Angel and I were putting this music school together a long time ago, we had a daughter who was very young, and we went to the movies and we watched this Disney cartoon. And back then I had code words. I was using code words like number and one and synthesizer and things like diatonic and harmony and those types of words. And what happened is I wanted to get something that was kind of grouped together, that was more common and easier for kids. And as we were watching the movie, we noticed that they were always beating a drum. And whenever they beat the drum, go drum, 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 drum. So we decided that the quarter note would be the word drum. And if you put that here in this position, that's a single beat. And if I go drum, 2, 3, 4, drum, 2, 3, 4, drum, 2, 3, 4, drum, 2, that generates, that single syllable generates that quarter note for us. If I want to subdivide into 2 pieces, then I need a 2-syllable word. And the 2-syllable word we chose was, of course, from the cartoon Tarzan. Tarzan. So if I say drum, every time my metronome ticks away, I'm put on the metronome here now, and the camera's a little closer. I hope you can hear the bell now. Last week I noticed we couldn't hear the bell, and I also noticed that my chair was squeaky, so we got rid of the bench, and I've got myself a nice soft chair so I don't squeak through this. We also turned the blackboard so it doesn't reflect the fluorescent light above, and you'll be able to see it, and we got some new markers here, so I hope that helps. All right, so every time we hear drum, 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 that is generating a single syllable or single sound for each of the 4 beats. Drum, 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 drum. And on a drum it would be, you would hit the first beat louder. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Just that simple, all right? So all quarter notes, the word drum generates a single pulse. Now if I want to subdivide that same amount of time that this thing is ticking back and forth into smaller pieces, each one half the size, I use a word that has 2 syllables. Now it's important that that word has an even division. You can't use something like Humpty Dumpty or Skiddly Doo. It doesn't work. So the word Tarzan, 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 Tarzan. So for every beat that you hear, every pulse on the metronome, if I say the word Tarzan, 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 drum, drum, Tarzan, drum, Tarzan, drum, 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 Tarzan, 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 drum, Tarzan, drum, drum, tarzan, drum. Can you start to hear it? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just leave these up here for now, and I'm going to start tapping out or just clapping with my hands using these two code words, and I'm going to say them out loud. And then very slowly, I'm going to start making my voice softer and softer till you can't hear my voice at all. And what I hope will happen is you will still hear the code words in your head. And as I'm clapping, you should be able to hear this in your mind and be able to say them. And I'm only going to put, later, I'm only going to put 4 of them together and see if you can hear them and teach you how to write them out, okay? So, now listen carefully. Drum, drum, tarzan, 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 drum, tarzan, drum, drum, tarzan, drum, tarzan, 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 drum, drum, tarzan, drum, tarzan, drum. I hope you could hear that in your head, okay? Now I'm going to try it with a stick on the actual drum, and you should still be able to hear it. Drum, tarzan, tarzan, drum, drum, tarzan, 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 drum, drum, tarzan, tarzan, drum, drum. Listen. You could hear that. Now what I'm going to do is do the same thing, but this time I'm going to do it on the keyboard, on the piano. So we get used to hearing what it sounds like as a pitch. Drum, tarzan, drum, tarzan, 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 drum, tarzan, drum, tarzan, drum, 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 tarzan, drum. Next thing that happens is it moves around on the pitch. So if I took 3 notes, I could take those 3 notes and still play those rhythms, and regardless of what pitch we're on, see if you can still hear the code words. And again, I'll start out saying them, and then I'll slowly mute my voice. Drum, tarzan, tarzan, drum, tarzan, tarzan, drum, drum, tarzan, 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 drum, tarzan, tarzan, drum, drum. Okay, so you should have been able in all 3 cases, regardless of whether it was my hands clapping, whether it was the drum, or whether it was the piano, or whether it was on the pitch. You should be able to hear those code words. Now the next thing we're going to do is, how do you write them down? Well, it's all about the stem. And what we're going to do is use the pencil on the paper as if it's an actual drum. I want you to put on the page, when you're put your paper or something on something with a hard back, so when you draw with the pencil, you can actually hear the tip of the pencil, something like this. And what I did was drum, drum, tarzan, drum. And if I put a little line on each one like this, now it actually looks like a rhythm. So what we're going to do is I'll clap a rhythm, and then I'll draw it out for you. And then what I want you to do is to slowly pick up on being able to do that as well. So first rhythm, I'm going to take and just use the 2 code words and generate 4 beats with those 2 code words. So it'll either be a single syllable or a double syllable popping up in one of these positions. All right? So listen very carefully. I'll do it again. Now if I take my pencil, I can do this. Put the flag across those two right there, and what I heard was, and this is drum, drum, Tarzan, drum. Okay, let's do another one. Do it again. Once more. Now take the pencil and go. With the little cross bridges there, the little flags, and I have Tarzan, Tarzan, drum, drum. Do it again. Put little X's, I just made drum music. And most drum music will have a single line, and they'll put these little X'd things on there, and you'd be able to read that rhythm as Tarzan, Tarzan, drum, drum. Okay, let me try another one. Again. Again. So here's what I should hear with the pencil. Right? And we put our little X's on. There's our drum music. Right? Just that simple. Now, what's going to happen is next week we're going to get right into this, and I'm going to start generating lots of rhythms using these two code words, and we're just going to spend the entire time doing dictation. But right now, I want to give you some little advice on this, and we'll do a couple more before this in the next 5 minutes, okay? One piece of information is, how can I get this going on a regular basis? People who are rhythmically deaf or have a hard time hearing the metronome have trouble with it, and I found that the best way to deal with this is as you're walking down the street, you just simply, every time you put your foot forward, you say one of these code words. So let's assume my hands are walking. I'm walking down the street. Drum, drum, Tarzan, Tarzan, drum, Tarzan, Tarzan, drum, Tarzan, Tarzan, drum, drum, Tarzan, drum, Tarzan, drum, Tarzan, 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 drum, 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 Tarzan, drum, 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 Tarzan, 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 drum. And just walking down the street like that. Now, if it's 4 beats, and I start off with my right foot, then the 1 is going to come on my right foot again. So if I go drum, Tarzan, Tarzan, drum, 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 Tarzan, 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 drum, drum, Tarzan, Tarzan, drum. So what happens is my right hand would always be that 1. Here I'd have a right hand again. It's right, left, right, back to the right hand. So every other right you hit harder, then a passive, and then a harder one. Right? And that's the way you keep it going. Another thing is just clapping your hands. Another thing is just getting a steady beat going in your head and saying the code words out loud. Another thing is when you're sitting at a piano, you're just going Tarzan, 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 drum, 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 Tarzan, drum, 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 Tarzan, 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 drum, drum. Right? Or on any instrument. Just say those code words. Strum your guitar. Play your cello or your violin using those code words on a single string until you can hear them. So now, another thing is, if you take some milk cartons and you take the milk carton and you cut it off like this, you can put the word drum with the symbol right here on one side, and then on another side we can put Tarzan. Now I also have other code words, elephant and alligator, which we will learn later, but for now, drum and Tarzan are all we need. And if I set these down like this, just 4 boxes, you can see what we have here is this rhythm. Drum, 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 drum. Now what we do with the kids is we'll hide a toy under one of them and say, do that. And we'll say, okay, I'm going to put out a rhythm, and my rhythm's going to have, there's going to be one Tarzan in my rhythm someplace, and you have to find out where it is. So we'll leave it like this with the toy under there, and we'll go, and the kids will say, drum, drum, Tarzan, one, it's under there. They pick it up and they go, ah, and they have to put the Tarzan so we can see what it looks like. It's a simple trick. It's not terribly interesting to adults, but you'd be surprised. Kids like to find things. Okay, so I can put one, say I put one under here, and I put something under here. So then I can go, so what do you hear? Drum, Tarzan, drum, Tarzan. Drum, Tarzan. Oh, so it must be under there, Mr. Natural. Drum, Tarzan. Oh, it must be under there. And ta-da, and then they get their little prize. After a while, they get to the point where they can use these 4 boxes to write out any 4-beat rhythm that they want using drum and Tarzan. And just by simply turning the box like this, we can change the rhythms around. Tarzan drum, Tarzan drum, Tarzan drum, Tarzan drum. Drum, Tarzan, Tarzan drum, drum, Tarzan, Tarzan drum, drum, Tarzan, Tarzan drum. This is a really convenient way of being able to just generate these things. And you can play, for instance, we can set this in front of the piano and have a person play. And then while they're doing that, I can reach out and change one, and then they have to go. And I can reach out and change another one, like that, and then it's. Right? And we can change one at a time in real time. If you just change one of these at a time, can you see how it works? So you can use these little boxes as a simple way to show you what all 4 beats would look like, and you can just work with those 2 code words on and on. Now, here's the thing. Your homework is, I want you to take the 4 beats and to write the code words in here. If I write, for instance, drum, 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 that's a 4-beat rhythm. And then I go, okay, what can I put in there? Well, I can put a code word in there, a Tarzan. So I might write drum, Tarzan, drum, drum, right? And then that would be the next one. So that now I have one rhythm, here's a second rhythm. So then I might take and write drum, 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 Tarzan, Tarzan. And there's a third rhythm. And if you keep doing this, eventually what you will discover is that there are only 16 possibilities total. So if you take, and here I just quickly generated just before the lesson, I sat down and wrote out all of these. So here we have drum, 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 drum. That's one. Then I went drum, 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 Tarzan. That's the second rhythm. Then I moved the Tarzan over. Drum, drum, Tarzan, drum. Move the Tarzan over again. Drum, Tarzan, drum, drum. Move it over again. Tarzan, drum, drum, drum. And right there I've generated 5 of them already. Then you can bring in 2. Tarzan, Tarzan, drum, drum. Place them in different places. And then later you can bring up 3. Drum, Tarzan, 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 drum, Tarzan, Tarzan, Tarzan. Or you can reverse that and go Tarzan, 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 drum, Tarzan, 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 drum. Or you can have Tarzan, 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 Tarzan. And you will see that when you're done, there will be exactly 16 possibilities and no more. So what I want you to do is see if you can figure out and write out the 16 possibilities. You have to watch yourself, and if you're really careful about being symmetrical about what you do, and you look at other code words, for instance, and just reverse them, you can get the inversion of that by reversing it. So Tarzan, drum, can become drum, Tarzan, and you can have fun with these, move them around, and you'll see. Now, I had a student come in here who had 18 of them. So we looked through them very carefully, and what he had done is naturally he had duplicated 2 of them, and he had written them so sloppy he didn't recognize them. Cross out the 2 that he did, and boom, he had 16. So there are only 16 possibilities, and I want you to try all 16 possibilities. And remember, the tip of the pen should generate the rhythm, and then you just put in your little bar lines. So one more rhythm. Drum, Tarzan, drum. So with my pen, it's put in the flags across to give us the look of the Tarzan, and ta-da, there you are. Okay? So that's this week's lesson. Next week, we will continue on with this, but during the entire lesson, it will be mostly ear training. And what I'll do is you just bring pencil and paper with you. Do not use pen because you cannot erase it. No ballpoint pens, no ink pens. Don't use Sharpies or magic markers. Get yourself a pencil or charcoal or something that can be erased. So you can try a rhythm, and if you're wrong, you can scratch it out and erase it, all right? Always work with pencil and paper. It's a good habit to get into, and it really helps you to see what you're hearing. And when you take what we're saying and what you're hearing and what you see, and you put all 3 of them together, then all of a sudden the magic starts to happen, and you'll be able to hear these code words, and you'll be able to write them down. Also, listen to music, and you'll start to hear them in music. Sometimes Bach has these cute little things where he's going bum 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 bum. Drum, Tarzan, drum, 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 Tarzan, drum, 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 Tarzan, drum, Tarzan, drum, Tarzan, 1, 2, 3. Easy stuff. You'll see that the Bach, the first book of Bach, written for Anna Magdalena, almost all of the songs in there use mostly drum and Tarzan, and you can read through 80% of the songs in there right now. You can go look at a piece of music that's using just these 2 code words, and you'll be shocked that Bach uses what we call Isil Rhythms. He'll take one simple rhythm that's a measure long, and he will use that rhythm over and over, and then do a little variation on it, and then come right back to it and use it over and over. So drum and Tarzan are a simple way to get through and start reading most music. Okay, until next Thursday at 7:30, please go to lulu.com or to amazon.com and buy my music book, Music Theory Decoded, Strictly by the Numbers. In here we have my device called the Intervalometer, which is a thing that you can put on a little device that you can put on your keyboard. It fits behind the black keys on your keyboard, and it numbers the keys for you. Later we'll be doing scales, or we'll be using this numbering. We also have inside of here a little thing which I call this thing is like, here you have the ABCs, you have your sharps and flats, and then you have your major scale and your minor scale sliders, and you can put these right in here and move them around and convert the ABCs to the 1, 2, 3s and back and forth. So this is like a slide rule for music. And then also inside it will show you the spellings, the 17 spellings for the major scale and the 17 spellings for the minor scale, and it will number them and show you that all 17 major scales can be numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And in this book we explain enough music theory to get you through the first 2 years of any music college course, and you'll also be able to actually understand it. We have lots of pictures, lots of color, And we also have a thing called My Magic Wheel, which we'll explain later on when we get into scales. So please go buy Music Theory Decoded, strictly by the numbers, at Amazon or at lulu.com. And also for those of you who are just starting out and want to be able to play songs quickly, if you have one scale, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, you can buy this book, Mr. Natural's Song by the Numbers. And in here we have converted a bunch of songs to simple number code. Can you read that? And what happens is you can see those numbers represent do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So most of you people in Europe who've learned to say that in Latin, well, just learn to count from 1 to 7 in your own language. It'll be a lot easier. And so it's easier to go uno, dos, tres, cuatro, or to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, et cetera, or in any language. Just counting to 7 is all you need to do to be able to do the most advanced music theory. So please, go buy my book, and see you next time, next week, folks. Thank you. The X. Okay, that was a little over half an hour.
Are you sure you want to stop streaming? Cancel or end? End.